Hi guys, it's Debbie. Another month has flown by and we're inching close to the end of the year, so soon I'll be sharing my videos about the best and worst films of 2023. But for now, it's time to chat about everything I watched this month, what I loved, what I hated, and of course, I would love to hear what you've been watching this month, what you've loved and what you've hated, so let me know in the comments below. One of my favourite movies of the month was Aloners, a Korean film which hit a little too close to home. As the title suggests, it speaks about loneliness, about how progressively more isolated our society is becoming, how we're living fixated on work with our noses always buried in our phones, and just trying to numb out all the rest. The protagonist of this film embodies all of this, so lost in that lifestyle that she oversees crucial things happening around her, until mentoring a cheery new recruit at work offers her a fresh perspective on life. This film made me cry so much, and I would recommend it to all of those who, like me, sometimes feel like we're just rotting our life away, lost in our screens, and just missing out on everything else that's happening in life. Another gem this month was Asghar Farhadi's film A Hero. Following my love for his film A Separation, I was eagerly looking forward to watch this film and it didn't disappoint. If you like anxiety-inducing stories along the lines of something like Uncut Gems, this is right up your alley. In brief, without spoilers, it's the story of a man who steals a bag of coins and by trying to return them sets off a chain reaction which then spirals into chaos for himself and everyone close to him, for his career, his legal status. I loved it. Next up we have The Killer by David Fincher, one of my favourite directors, and so a film I was eagerly looking forward to. Now, many expected this film to be a dark crime thriller along the lines of other films of his such as Zodiac, Seven, Gone Girl, but in reality this film is packed with irony. It nearly pokes fun at the usual crime thriller tropes. Michael Fassbender plays a hitman caught in a wild mission across the globe after a job goes wrong. Sure, it has the gritty fight sequences, but it's more about the behind the scenes, the planning, the waiting, the failed parts of his missions, the boring side of them. Personally, I didn't fancy the ending, but overall it really is a great fun watch. I also watched another older crime thriller, Black Tide, starring Vincent Cassel. It's nothing extraordinary. It introduces that stereotyped grumpy, drunk detective who somehow manages to keep his work even if he fights with everybody. And in this case, he has to deal with his own personal issues while tackling the mysterious disappearance of a teenager. I then watched When Evil Lurks, an Argentinian horror film everybody's been raving about, so of course I had to give it a go. It centers on the idea of a sinister curse spreaded through even the slightest touch. And this means a small rural town is quickly overtaken about it, especially impacting the protagonist and his family as he fights to protect his loved ones. Although it does have some narrative inconsistencies, some plot holes, some rules of the curse are introduced and then completely ignored, but it is packed with intense gory scenes and creepy supernatural aspects, and I can definitely understand why this film is so popular. Another horror film I watched this month is Black Christmas, a classic 70s movie set during the holidays and which features a group of women who are tormented by a mysterious killer. Although it's heavily marketed as a slasher, the psychological torment inflicted by the killer, the eerie phone calls, and the indifference of the policeman who the protagonist turned to personally scared me way more. I then rewatched the timeless classic The Silence of the Lambs, one of my favourite films of all time and a film which deeply influenced my personal aesthetic. It is part of the Hannibal Lecter series, the Hannibal the Cannibal series, and features Jodie Foster as a young FBI agent interrogating a cannibalistic serial killer for insight into another case. I absolutely love this film, and if you haven't watched it, go watch it. I also watched a few other horror films, but which didn't really hit the mark. For example, I watched Five Nights at Freddy's, one of the most popular films of the whole year, and which features a young man who takes on a job as a night guardian at a closed entertainment centre, but which is haunted by its animatronic mascots. It does have some chilling sequences, especially when the animatronics attack, but the storytelling and delivery were so cringeworthy, especially the lines delivered by the policewoman who ends up helping the protagonist. I then watched Saw X, and based on the reviews, I was expecting an absolute masterpiece, but I personally found it, and don't hate me, very underwhelming, and to be brutally honest, I have no clue why people are considering this a revolution in the saga. In this chapter, John Kramer carries out revenge on a group of doctors who claim they have a miraculous cure for his cancer. I get that it delved deeper into his personality, into his motivations. It kind of tries to humanize his choices, which, if you think of it, is pretty disturbing. But in my humble opinion, it just wasn't so astounding. One thing I feel nobody is pointing out is that if this film is set right after the first chapter, Amanda should look more or less similar to the first films, but of course 20 years have passed since then, so of course our actress looks different. I don't know, it felt off. Continuing the horror streak, I watched Thanksgiving, directed by Eli Roth, known for his cheesy, over-the-top splatter horror movies, for example the Hostel films, Knock Knock. And Thanksgiving combines gore and slasher elements. It's about an extremely creative killer who targets a group of friends with a ton of unexpected comedy. Literally, the whole theatre room was laughing out loud throughout most of the film, and thankfully that made up for the delivery and the dialogues, which weren't that good. But enough horror for now, let's venture into other genres. I watched Nimona, an animated movie set in a fictional world which combines medieval and sci-fi elements. The two outcast protagonists, a knight falsely accused of murder, and the shape-shifting titular Nimona, who because of her powers is labelled as a monster, team up and embark on a fun, adventurous journey that caters to both kids and adults. Remember when Disney caused a stir by introducing a non-binary character in Elemental, or putting that famous lesbian kiss in Lightyear? It sparked a huge conversation about a supposed gay agenda, and it felt like they were proudly trying to show off how inclusive they are. Nimona, on the other hand, seamlessly incorporates many so-called unconventional elements into its story, normalizing them without pressuring anyone. I then watched Dream Scenario by Christoph Borgli, the director of Sick of Myself, which I had watched just last month. Dream Scenario stars Nicolas Cage as a college professor catapulted into sudden global fame as random people all around the world start dreaming about him. What begins as a quirky fame spirals into a dark, frightening turn, and the movie turned out to be much more frightening than this light-hearted, weird but comedic style that the trailer seemed to propose. Borgli's exploration of vanity and fame really intrigues me, so I'm curious to see more of his work. In November, I also watched Marilyn agli occhi neri, translated to Marilyn's Eyes, an Italian film starring two famous actors, Stefano Corsi and Miriam Leone, who portray two individuals undergoing treatment at a psychiatric rehabilitation centre. They end up bonding as they work together for the centre's member-run restaurant and have to navigate a lot of troubles, joys, struggles together. While not a masterpiece, this film made me realise how quickly we label, point, judge people as crazy without understanding their full narrative. I then watched A Stranger Among Us, probably the worst film of the whole month. It's set within the Hasidic Jewish community of New York, a topic I've explored with many other films and series like Menashe, One of Us, Unorthodox, but this film felt superficial, stereotypical, poorly written, missing the chance to explore the community's intrigue and facets through the eyes of an outsider, as the protagonist is a policewoman who goes undercover in the community to investigate a brutal murder. But rather than delving deep into the different lifestyles within the community, the exploration remains confined to surface level interactions. For example, the protagonist seems unaware of the concept of the camps when speaking about an elderly leader of the community who was interned in them. Another bad film I watched this month is She Came to Me, which, although stars some very famous names like Peter Dinklage, Marisa Tomei, Anne Hathaway, feels like a confused jumble of storylines which are forced to somehow come together. Peter Dinklage portrays a composer struggling with a creative crisis. He's trying to complete this new piece, and while he's out looking for inspiration, he meets an interesting woman, let's put it like that. I'll leave it up to you, as I know some people found merit in this film, but personally I couldn't quite connect with it. I then watched Catherine Called Birdie. I've mentioned in the past how I'm not a fan of director Lena Dunham's work, but I was intrigued by this film. It's a bit of a mess, but it's not as terrible as I was expecting. The protagonist definitely feels like Lena Dunham wished she could have been her, and the film strongly emphasizes female empowerment, although with several plot holes. The protagonist, Catherine Called Birdie, is desperately trying to avoid her father's attempts to get her husband to arrange a marriage for her, leading to a lot of comedic situations. It's not a great film. Some moments were embarrassingly cringeworthy, but many scenes were genuinely funny, and Andrew Scott's performance is always stellar. I wonder how I would have reacted to this as a teenager. Anyway, to cleanse my palate, or to better say my eyes, that same night I rewatched God's Creatures. This time around, with a better understanding of the story's trajectory, I could better analyse the characters' actions and appreciate their dynamics more. In this film, Paul Mescal portrays a mysterious, ambiguous young man who suddenly returns home to his Irish family and gets back in the oyster farming business. But his return brings a big secret, and I won't say more to not spoil the plot. Emily Watson was absolutely amazing as a mother torn between doing what's right and her own protective feeling for her family. I really don't understand why this film has such low ratings. Maybe because it takes its time to unfold everything and it doesn't just explicitly show everything. And then on to Quiz Lady, starring Awkwafina and Sandra Oh as two sisters who join forces and embark on a crazy mission to get their mother out of trouble. Using their younger sister's passion and talent for game shows, they embark on a lengthy and weird journey, encountering various characters and obstacles along the way. It's not an Oscar-worthy film, but it's a fun light watch. One of the most intriguing films of the month instead was Fingernails, starring Riz Ahmed and Jessie Buckley as co-workers for a company specialising in optimizing relationships. The company's methods involve a mix of couples therapy and then a scientific analysis of cells, DNA, something like that, to understand a couple's compatibility. The company says it aims at preventing doomed relationships, reducing divorces, but it raises intriguing questions. Does a relationship need such analysis? Would it potentially worsen things for a couple who already feel compatible? And amidst this, the protagonists begin questioning their own feelings for each other. It really is an interesting story, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the future some tech company comes up with something similar. I then watched Sylvester Stallone's new documentary Sly, which I knew would be coming a few months back when Schwarzenegger released his documentary. But to be fair, it's not what I expected. Unlike Schwarzenegger's documentary that analysed all his life right from his childhood, Stallone's primarily focuses on Rocky, his breakout role that launched him to fame. It delves deep into the film, exploring Stallone's perspective that it's more of a love story, a flawed character's journey. While I personally am not a die-hard fan of Stallone, if you love his films, this could be an interesting documentary for you. I then finished watching Wes Anderson's short films based on Roald Dahl's work. Having watched The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar just last month, in November I watched The Swan, Poison and The Ratcatcher. Each short is absolutely enchanting with its rapid narration, whimsical theatrical sets and great acting. They're really enjoyable, and being shorts, they're perfect for a quick watch. One follows a patient attacked by a poisonous snake. Another features a rat catcher sharing his peculiar techniques, but my favourite was the story of a young boy bullied by two kids. I then finally watched Koyani Squatsi, which had been sitting on my watch list for ages. It's a breathtaking visual experience. Some argue that technically it's not even a documentary, as there's nobody speaks. It's solely based on imagery, and it juxtaposes Earth's beauty with the destructive impact of human behaviour. The film shows digging, building, deforestation, depletion, pollution, and what I find absolutely terrifying is that this documentary is 40 years old. One can only imagine how appalling it would be if this documentary were made today, what we would see. I then watched Dumb Money, which covers the true events of an online movement that shook the stock market by driving GameStop stocks unexpectedly high. The protagonist, portrayed by Paul Dano, is the man who believed in this movement right from the start. He invested all his life savings and emerged as the online leader of this Eat the Rich revolution. It's hard to summarize the whole deal here, but it's an incredibly fascinating story. Then, of course, I rewatched Twilight, as I do nearly every month, but this time I had a good reason, as it was the 15th anniversary of its release. So how couldn't I? I then watched Somewhere Special, the absolutely gut-wrenching story of a single dad who is terminally ill. He knows he doesn't have much time left and he's trying to find a new family for his son after his passing. So just imagine having to deal with a sickness like that, knowing you might die soon, and then having to talk to people about becoming your child's new family and then explaining all this to your kid. It's so painful, but it also shows his sense of responsibility. And last but not least, The Passengers of the Night, starring Charlotte Gainsbourg as a woman whose marriage is falling apart. She's a bit in a stressful, chaotic moment of her life, but everything changes when she lands a job as a radio host and at the same time welcomes a troubled teenager into her home, causing a lot more chaos. It's a subtle film focusing on simple human connections without any exaggerated drama. But with that, we have reached the end of today's list. I would now love to hear what you think about all these titles, what you've been watching, what you liked, what you hated. Let me know everything with a comment below. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.